All right, welcome back. Shukran jazilan. Okay, for the next part of this lesson, we're going to learn one consonant, but it is a fairly difficult one to write, but it's one you'll use a lot. So this consonant is called ha, and it makes the sound of H, as in many words we have. Happy, hello, hungry, home. Okay, just like that. Now, one thing that's important to note is that in Arabic, we pronounce all the letters, and we pronounce them the way they're supposed to be, unlike English. Now, in English, the letter H often doesn't get a lot of respect. Sometimes it's written in words, and we don't even pronounce it. Like, for example, look at these. Okay, and these would just pop up. Okay, two names, very familiar. How do we pronounce them? Well, you know we pronounce them both the same. Sarah and Sarah. Okay, one has an H on it. It's not pronounced. Now, that's not the way in Arabic. If you had an H sound, you would pronounce it. So just understand, wherever this appears, even if it appears at the end of the word, it's going to be pronounced as a ha. Okay? So let's look at how we write this. Okay, now bear with me. This is going to be one of the trickier letters to write. And we're getting a lot of the tricky stuff, the difficult stuff at the beginning. That's going to make it easier as we go along. Trust me. Now this letter has 4 distinct shapes, and it's really the only letter in the alphabet that really has 4 completely distinct shapes. As we've seen with the others, the difference between a ba at the beginning, in the middle, at the end was a slight variance. This one actually has a lot of variance. Now, when ha is written by itself, just for your reference, it's usually written something like this. Pretty much like a circle, but it's usually kind of looks like it's been flattened a little bit. Okay, but the different forms of it look very different. So let's take first the initial ha at the beginning of a word. This one is somewhat tricky to write. You're going to stay in between these 2 lines here. We go over the top, and we make a little curly Q like that. Now, I understand that may be a little bit difficult, so you want to practice these, okay? And we've got examples for you that you can copy and practice yourself, okay? But it's a little bit tricky. So notice I start, I come over the top, and then I put this little loop in the center, and I continue on. Ha is a connecting letter, so I'm going to have to continue. Now, this is pretty much the way you're going to see it in print. In handwriting, because it is a tricky letter, you're going to see a lot of variation on this. But this is the only one that's got the little squiggly, so it's fairly easy to recognize. Okay? In the middle of a word, it's somewhat easier. It makes what we would call a figure 8. And notice it does dip below the line. Okay, the bottom part is on the bottom. Okay, it makes like that figure 8 sound, but it's still the ha sound. At the end of a word, as I said, these are all very distinct shapes. Ha is usually going to come up something like this. It looks similar to its shape by itself, but connected, but usually it's going to come up above, come off the line a little bit. It looks something like maybe the head of a turtle, perhaps. And this is so it doesn't get mixed up with other letters that might look similar. Now, granted, we're talking about 4 very distinct shapes here. I realize that particularly these 2, the one by itself and the one at the end, look very different than these 2, which have something in common. But this is also a very distinct shape. It's unique. Nothing else has this curly shape to it. So when you see it, you know what it is. Okay, so let's look at some examples and see if we can recognize it. Okay, here we are. We have 5 words, and there are a lot of letters that you will not recognize in these words, and that's okay. What we want to be able to do is pick out the ha because it is very distinct. So let's look at this first word. Again, there's a number of things we have that we haven't seen before, but hopefully you can recognize this final form of the he. Notice that sort of coming up over off the line a bit, that sort of turtle head shape to it. Okay, that's a final he. Here's another word, Harun. It's a name, but where do we see the he? Of course, it's right there at the beginning. This squiggly shape, and there's really nothing else that looks like this in the Arabic language. So when you see that, you know that is the ha, right? The ha. Okay. Here, hopefully, it sticks out to you, that figure 8 shape in the middle. Okay. Again, same thing here. It is again. And lastly, well, it's right here. And this is one, actually, you can sound out. Buh. Buh. Right? We have the ba, we have the u, we have the ha. Buh. And notice we have to pronounce the ha sound where it appears. Now again, as I said, these are very different shapes, so you have to get used to seeing them. They're actually easier to recognize in the beginning and middle shape. It's recognizing them at the end of the word that's a little bit difficult. And one final point about this letter to remember is that this letter has no dots on it, ever. Okay? And we can never put dots on a letter that are not there. So if you see a shape that looks like this, that has dots on it, that is not this letter. It's something else. Okay, so I realize this is a little bit challenging to deal with. That's why we have exercises for you. If you go and you do those, practice those exercises, you'll get used to seeing this sound, recognizing this sound when you're hearing it, and also will reinforce all the other letters that you have learned. So believe me, you have learned quite a lot. You've really learned the basic mechanics of how this alphabet works at this point. And so we will see you next time. Please persist with those learning those letters. Okay? Thank you. Shukran jazilan.